Hello, everybody. This is Constance from Mysterious Galaxy. I just want to thank all of the amazing readers for joining us and for the amazing authors that we have tonight. I'm very excited because we are here with Lee Child, as well as Lauren Sanders and Jonathan Ames to celebrate the Nicotine Chronicles, which is just a collection of phenomenal stories. I'm going to let them go into more of the creepy, awesome goodness that they have in store for you with these books. And just to give a quick little bio on our authors, Lee Child, many of you know, is the #1 best-selling of the Jack Reacher series. Lauren Sanders is the author of 2 novels, KAMIKAZE Lust, which won a Lambda Award, and With or Without You. And then Jonathan Ames also has books under his belt like I Pass Like Night, The Extra Man, as well as the HBO series Bored to Death. That's just a quick little intro. And I'm going to go ahead and let them take it away, tell you more about themselves as well as the writing process and this awesome book. 2 notes before I leave, though. This is the Vanna White section of the event, if you will. If you look down below, you will see where it says, ask a question. And as the title would imply, if you have any questions for our authors, please click that button, and that is where you can ask them any questions that you have. And also, the best way to celebrate a book, if you ask me, being a bookseller, is to buy the book. I'm just going to say. So if you look down below, there is that green button that says buy book, and you can buy the book, and you can also get a signed book plate with it. So I am going to go ahead and let the authors take it away and have an amazing event, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'm Lee Child, and I edited this book. This is the book that we're all talking about. I think this is just the most wonderful jacket. I love this jacket. I would, if I wasn't in the book, I would buy it simply for the jacket. And I'm thrilled that tonight we are joined by Jonathan Ames and Lauren Sanders, who, you know, when you're an editor of a thing like this, you do not know who's going to respond, who's going to be willing to actually cough up a story for the anthology. And I was totally thrilled to get these 2. And it was prescient because these 2 stories are unbelievable. These are the really great stories. But first of all, I got to say a big thank you to Mysterious Galaxy, really one of my favorite bookstores ever. And I'm so sorry that we can't be there personally, you know, but obviously in 2020, nobody goes anywhere personally. So we're doing it all by this remote video system, which we've been doing all summer, the last many months, and they've been getting better and better and better. And this particular system means that you don't know this, but we can see you as well as you seeing us. But there's a lot of you, so you're all very small. So I have to put on my glasses just to have a look. I can see my friend Ao. There she. I can see my dear friend Maggie. I can see Guy Van Tresca, another good friend of mine. We've got Virginia from the Lauren Sanders fan club is here, and Deborah is here. Look at them all. Fantastic. Good to see you guys. But I've got to start out with a story about Mysterious Galaxy, which, like a lot of my incoherent stories, is going to ramble on for a bit, but it will loop back. I promise. It will loop back to this, because Mysterious Galaxy was one of the stops on my very first book tour, which was in 1998. My first book was out in 97, but you never tour for your first book because nobody knows who you are, so it's pointless. So you tour for your second book, which I did in 98. And one of the stops was Mysterious Galaxy. And it was the first time I had ever done a joint event. I was appearing with another author, a guy called Gary Phillips, who was just the most charming guy, terrific writer, real nice guy, became a good friend of mine. And he then, many years later, hit me up for a story for a book called The Cocaine Chronicles, which was by Akashic Press. Johnny Temple behind, as always, behind the idea. And so I did a story for The Cocaine Chronicles. And then a guy in New York called Jonathan Santlofer was editing a book for Akashic called The Marijuana Chronicles. So I did that too. And then here we are in 2020. Johnny said, would I like to edit one in the series called The Nicotine Chronicles? And the first thing I want to discuss with you guys is I felt kind of fine with cocaine, fine with marijuana, and I got no blowback whatsoever. There was zero negative comment. But I felt a little nervous about doing nicotine because people hate it so much, which I don't understand. I mean, I love it. I live on it. And I can't see the slightest thing wrong with it. But I sense that a slight disapproval around this subject. What do you guys think? Lauren, did you have any similar feeling?
Not really, and I think because I am a former smoker, so because I don't smoke, and nicotine is not really in my life anymore. I wasn't really having that kind of quandary over, is this going to be okay? And nicotine was always my favorite addiction. I mean, I think it probably still is, even as a non-smoker.
They say there's no such thing really as a non-smoker. Somebody who's not smoking at the moment but would really like to.
Yeah, exactly.
Jonathan, what did you feel? Did you feel in any way that it was a slight danger?
Well, I'm trying to remember my initial reaction because I had always heard of the noir series. It was like San Francisco noir or Chicago noir. So I got an email from Johnny Temple, and I always like getting an email from him because his name is like out of a noir story. Like Johnny Temple, he's a guy, at the club who's, I don't know, got dealings going on, is good with a knife. Anyway, he said doing a nicotine noir, and I was initially like, and so you got to work nicotine into, or cigarettes into the story. So immediately I thought, well, maybe someone's smuggling cigarettes. I couldn't quite figure out how to go noir with it. So I think that was more my initial problem. And also, unlike the two of you, even though I would have qualified for cocaine noir and marijuana noir and alcohol noir, and I saw someone put caffeine noir and coffee noir, there's a lot of noirs that I would qualify for in a 12-step way. But I've been an anti-smoker because my father was a cigar smoker as a kid for me growing up, and I was like inundated in smoke, and so I have an aversion for it. So I wondered if I could, anyway, but it turned out to be a great prompt, and I'll shut up. But one thing I just remembered, using the prompt of cigarettes or nicotine, I started actually what has become my novel that's coming out in April. And I thought, wait, this is too big for this short story collection. So I put that away and then wrote the story. But so thank you. The cigarettes and in your intro, you said nicotine makes us think faster. So just even the prompt gave birth to a novel and this story.
Well, I don't know how I feel about it. I wanted you exclusively. I don't want to stimulate a novel.
Yeah, opening the novel is all about a man who, well, I don't want to give it away, but his body's actually falling apart from 50 years of smoking. Anyway, but it kicked off the novel though. But I got to put something in the, how it happened. Anyway.
Just tell me one thing. Did you like your dad, the cigar smoker?
Did I like my father?
Yeah.
Yes, I love him still, luckily in the present tense. And yeah, but the smoke I didn't love. He had a little office in our basement by the boiler, and my bedroom was above it. And he would sit there doing his bills and his paperwork. He was a salesman, and the cigar smoke would come up into my room for about, I guess 20 years.
See, from my point of view was that my own family, my parents were totally opposed to anything that could ever give you pleasure, like smoking, like that. Severely uptight, repressed people. But my mother's father, my grandfather, was just a regular guy. He would have a couple of beers on a Friday night, and he smoked. And he was the only nice guy in that entire family. He was the only one that I felt close to, and the only one that I felt happy with. So to me, that what you're talking about, the house full of smoke, that smell, to me, that's the smell of love and acceptance. And that's really what made me a smoker, I think. It just feels good in a very elemental and primitive way.
It's your Madeleine over and over.
Yeah.
You're going back to that feeling. I see myself, I had a cousin who I worshiped, and he wore V-neck t-shirts, and I thought he was the coolest guy. And I've worn V-neck t-shirts ever since. I would be uncomfortable with any other kind. But it's interesting, yeah, that you had such a positive association. I wonder how people will respond, though, because I guess that's your concern, because as a smoker, you know that so many people must give you a hard time about it.
Yeah, I mean, most of the year I'm in New York, and it's increasingly difficult, really. I find, but I've become preemptive about it. A little while ago, when I lived in my old neighborhood, I was walking down 23rd Street and coming to the corner with Fifth Avenue, and I could see that as I approached the corner on 23rd. A young woman with a baby in a stroller was approaching on Fifth, and I could see we were going to meet at the light. And I of course was smoking, and I thought she's gonna complain because she's got a kid, and she assumes, even though she's right next to a bus that is belching out diesel fumes and all that, she's going to assume my secondhand smoke is going to kill her kid. So as soon as we met at the light, I said, "Get that thing away from me." And she backed off 6 feet with the stroller, which I thought was... Before we talk about the actual book or stories or writing or anything like that, I want to ask, how has the lockdown and the distancing, how has that been purely as a writer, not about public policy or anything like that, just as a writer? Were you able to write and read in the normal way, better, worse? How has it affected you?
Well, I can say it's for me, it's definitely been worse in the sense of I can't focus. Now it's almost cliche, it's like, as a writer, and as one with a job, I'm constantly thinking, oh, if I just had some time, I would be able to, make something happen. And, it's, while the lockdown itself, I think as writers, the aloneness and that, it hasn't really been much different, than my life in some ways. Sure, you can't go out as much, but I actually do spend a lot of time alone and at home. But it's a whole different character of being alone and being locked down. So I've been finding it really, really hard to focus, and heading out into nature a lot more, and just trying to feed some other part of my brain.
I've found that it just sort of shrinks the day in a way that it shouldn't. You've got infinite amount of time to do everything. But I find if I do kind of 2 emails a day, I think, wow, that was a good day's work. And instead of doing 200 things, I'm proud of myself for doing 2. It's brought the horizons in. What about you, Jonathan?
Well, initially, I responded to the pandemic by walking. I was walking 10 miles a day. But then once it became a way of life, I I thought of it as an artist colony time. And actually writing has been the one thing that has helped me in a sense. It's the one thing that I feel perhaps I can make a contribution or gives me meaning or gives the day something to hold on to so as not to be constantly falling into despair over the politics, over the epidemic. And now here in California, stepping outside is, I've been told, is equivalent to smoking a pack of cigarettes. And so it's the writing, playing with my sentences, wanting to contribute art in some way or to speak of the time feels like the one thing perhaps that I can do to eventually connect to other human beings. So it has given me a lot of meaning, and I still, reading is my love, you know, so I'm so glad that we're at this bookstore. I'm always reading a book. I read in the morning, the afternoon, night. It's my preferred, it's been my, you know, companion all my life, books. And I think when you're a writer, you're a book lover. So in that sense, it's all been good. I mean, of late, you know, we're in a very difficult time in the world, and it's hard to maintain our equanimity with everything going on. But work for me has been a means for that.
One of the things that always struck me about literature from about, say, 100 years ago or slightly less is that the 1918 flu shows up almost nowhere in fiction. It was a gigantic event, killed tens of millions of people around the world, but it really doesn't show up much in fiction. Lauren, would you ever consider writing about this year from the COVID point of view? Is there anything in it that needs writing about?
I think it's really hard to say. I mean, for me, because I'm not the kind of writer who can process things immediately. So for me, it would take some kind of retrospect to be able to know what is here. I mean, certainly there's so much, and but yeah, I wouldn't know how to make sense of it. I mean, I will say with the book that I'm writing, I really had to make a decision to cut before it, because I thought if I go into this year, the entire thing is going to have to change, and I will have to write about it, because suddenly you can't move people around anymore on airplanes, and they can't sit next to each other, and all of these things that I need them to do, they're not going to be able to do. So I mean, it's sort of curtailed the world that I'm working on now, and you know, I have no idea if it'll show up in the future.
I think your point about retrospect is a really good one, because usually, whatever it is, there needs to be sometimes a whole generation. I mean, I've noticed this. You know, crime fiction is my thing. That's my genre. That's what I'm most into, and South Africa, for instance, right now is producing great crime fiction because we've had a whole generation really since the big upheaval there. Same thing out of Northern Ireland, that it is, again, practically a whole generation, and now we're seeing great crime fiction out of Northern Ireland. It's like when it's happening, you can't do it. You need that retrospect. But maybe with the virus, by the time you've waited long enough for the retrospection, it seems ugly and boring, and you don't want to do it anyway. I mean, would you do a book or a movie, Jonathan, about, I mean, how could you do it? It's an odd subject, isn't it?
Well, like the novel I wrote, inspired by your prompt, I made very clear it begins in March 2019, because our world is so different now. Now, the new book, as it's part of a series, begins in January 2020, and I had this idea for the novel before the pandemic occurred. So now actually, but I'm staying in that time, and it's a thriller. And so the COVID is actually entering into the character having to navigate this thriller in this world of the pandemic. So I'm literally bringing it into the story. as more of a backdrop, because the series of novels I'm writing, I do imagine proceeding chronologically. And time and our world is changing so rapidly. Like I was describing a hotel and the bar in the hotel in the present tense, but that bar may never be opened again. So it's within the sentence, I may have to say, pre-COVID, it was a place for Hollywood players and the pilot fish that surrounded them, or so, because it's just going to be interesting choices creatively, because we're in a kind of Mount Vesuvius moment. The landscape, our landscapes are changing, and it'd be interesting. And with publishing and the delays with books, you can very quickly seem dated. And anyway, but these are interesting dilemmas, but I am incorporating it in the new book, but more as the backdrop, adding to the thriller, adding to the stress and tension.
Awesome. That completely disproves my thesis then. First of all, you steal my prompts, and then you invalidate my point. Why did I put you in this book? But let's talk about those stories, which I can't remember how many stories are in this book, but they are, apart from mine, they are just extraordinary. I think I was so happy with them. And Lawrence is, talk about hard boiled. Where did all that come from? It was a longer story than I would do. When I'm asked to do a short story, I always agree, but I say there's a clue in the title, it's short. Yours was great length, and it was relentlessly just action-packed, emotion-packed, hard-boiled. I just loved it. So tell us where it came from.
Well, similarly, when Johnny approached me with the prompt, I was really excited because I thought, oh yeah, nicotine. I really love nicotine as a former smoker, and particularly, I started smoking really young, and in this era where everybody around me was smoking. I felt like, the kids that I was hanging around with, like 12, 13-year-old bad girls and bad boys, we were all smoking. Everyone's parents smoked. Everywhere you went, like if you went on a train, Amtrak, people were smoking. In doctors' offices, like I still vividly remembered that time of everyone smoking. And so I just started thinking about, okay, I'm definitely going to set this in that time because I think it's so foreign to people of subsequent generations to imagine just the extent that cigarettes were everywhere. And the idea of a cigarette brand was, associated with yourself and who you are. You could say who you were by like, oh, I'm a Marlboro Light smoker versus, Vantage because I like the dartboard. So it just kind of came out of my life in that sense. And then I thought about some of the young people that I hung around with and some of the stories. And while this one isn't true, it's kind of like a composite of things that really are from my youth. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I thought it was just a tremendous story. And so there it is. Look at that thing on the bottom of the screen. Buy the book. It's great. And Jonathan's story, it's very sweet and emotional at the beginning, and then it has twists, and the twists have twists, and you end up in a place that you could have offered me $1 million and I couldn't have seen where that story was going. So how did that happen, Jonathan?
Well, I know partly how it happened was when I started the second story, after I realized the first one was going to be a novel, I was in a motel room for like about 6 weeks. I had a family member was ill, and so I was in this hotel for like 6 weeks, and there was a double door. And so very much a lot of the action takes place in a motel room which has a connecting door. And also, even though I think my room was non-smoking, the blankets and the room still smelled of smoke, which kind of a little bit drove me nuts. So there was that. So I wrote the story, that's right, in the motel room. So that's where that began. And then the sweet part that you're talking about, the story is about a deathbed vigil. And as I was mentioning to Lee right before we came on, that was an autobiographical thing that I went through. I had a great aunt who was very dear to me. And I was kind of like her guardian the last 20, 25 years of her life. And I was on the West Coast. She was in a nursing home in New Jersey, and I got a phone call. She's going. And I immediately got on a plane, and they said they didn't think she'd be still there when I got to, but I didn't want her to die alone. So I got to the West Coast. I didn't even pack a bag. I mean, the East Coast. And then she ended up living another 6 days, which was wonderful. So I got to be with her through this process. And I think, anyway, so then the story was emerging of that in the motel room somehow. And maybe and I didn't put it into the story, but my great aunt, she was a smoker. And I should have worked that in, but in the first nursing home that I had to put her in, she actually got kicked out for smoking. She got a cigarette in the room, and she smoked it, and she lived to 102, and she still was smoking into her late 90s outside. People would give her a little cigarette, and she'd take, and anyway, so that's kind of how it came together. Motel room, my great aunt, cigarettes.
Well, that is also educational. I mean, here's a smoker who lived to 102.
I don't want to encourage you. She smoked these tiny, I think she smoked Virginia Slims starting in her 70s.
There you go. There was some French woman, I remember. What was she called? Jean Calmet or something like that, who allegedly was the oldest woman in Europe for a time at the age of 124. And she ascribed her longevity to quitting smoking at the age of 100. So, you got two alternate views there, really. There's a question on the screen. There's a question box here that we're looking at, and it says, do you prefer writing short stories or full novels? What is something you enjoy about each, and what challenges you? I mean, my answer to that would be, it's almost two separate universes for me, in that I have, generally speaking, short stories do not sell as well as regular novels. And so the audience is going to be smaller. But somehow in my head, that translates to meaning nobody's ever going to see it. And therefore, it's not that I don't care about them. I do. I care about them extremely. But I allow myself to do things in a short story that I wouldn't normally do because I assume nobody's ever going to see it. And of course, then they do, and it all feels a bit exposed. But yeah, mainly I'm a novelist, and I'm guessing all of us are. Being a short story writer is a bit like being a poet, I suppose. It's fun, but you're going to need a day job,
Well, I think one of the things, Lauren, about your story that was so incredible was that it was a short story, though, that did have that larger feeling of, and the best short story writers have like a novelistic thing where within 10 pages, you do feel like you've been with these characters for years or decades. And so the short story is a skill that I've never felt I fully possessed to really, create those gems. A novel, you can, I don't know, you have more room to get it out there. There's a concision to this short story. But I like what you said, though, Lee, about using this prompt to do something you wouldn't do otherwise. And it was fun to could I write like a real noir, hard-boiled, pulp kind of short story. And it was fun to try to do it. But I think the short story is really hard, especially to write a beautiful one.
Lauren, what do you think? Oh, I think Lauren has slipped out for a cigarette.
Yeah. Oh, am I Am I back, or am I still?
You're back.
Now, yeah. Yeah. So, what do you think? Short stories or novels? Which
Yeah, I mean, like I think like the two of you, I'm also very much at heart a novelist, and big, and it's kind of like Jonathan, you're saying you put the other one away because they start and they're just too big to contain in a way. And the last one of these prompts I did for, I think, for Akashic was the Wall Street Noir series, and it happened too where the short story wouldn't leave me. So after I was like, okay, I need to turn this into a novel, and that was my last novel. So this one, I just said, no way. This is going to be a short story, and it's going to contain everything that I need it to contain. And so within that, yeah, I think it did have the bigness, I hope. And I love them. I love writing them. But novels just, I don't know, they speak to me in a much different way. It's just how to see the world in its bigness and connect themes and people, and it just I just love that so much.
I wish I was better at short stories. Because there is a sort of paradigmical short story that is like a Swiss watch, beautiful, and then it has a so-called short story twist, which I know what it is when I see it, but there's no way I can do it. So, I wish somebody would give me a clue about that after all these years. That would be great. And a comment coming on the screen from my friend Guy Van Tresca, how did I select this list? Perhaps I always wanted to be accompanied by these writers between book covers. Yeah, well, that is absolutely the point of these anthologies, that you meet people outside of your own genre, people that maybe you've read and admired from afar, or you're aware of in some way, but there's no serious possibility of ever working with them. But then you get an anthology like this, and suddenly you are literally between the covers with people like you. And I love that. I did one, what was it? Oh, it was for ACLU, I think. Xerox gave ACLU some generous sponsorship, and we did a anthology. And again, the mix of people. I was in a book with people like Roxane Gay and so on, and what a thrill that is. So yeah, the question about how did I select them? Really, I didn't. It was just a question of asking everybody that I wanted. Johnny did the asking, which, as Jonathan said, Johnny Temple. If you don't mess with Johnny Temple, if he asks you to do something, you do it. And so it is a random and eclectic list, but it really works. They're very complementary to one another, and I'm very proud of how it came out. So let's do some short readings. If you guys read a little bit of yours, I'll read a little bit of mine, and we'll give people a sense of the flavor. So Jonathan, do you want to go first with that, or Lauren, or shall I? Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Okay. I'll read quickly just one or two sections of it or something. So here's the opening, at least. So it's called Deathbed Vigil. The nursing home called at 7 a.m., waking him. They said she had a few hours. It had happened fast during the night, a stroke. She was going quick. He told them, "Tell her Saul's coming," whispered in her ear. He was assured this would be done, and he hung up and put his cell phone back down on the bedside table. He sat up in bed and looked around the room. Sunlight seeped in around the edges of the brown curtains, and he didn't know where he was. It looked like a shabby motel room and smelled like one. Dead cigarette smoke, which he hated, which disgusted him. A panic began to well in his chest. He saw his large suitcase against the wall. Where the hell am I? Then it came to him all at once. Los Angeles. Then he got out of bed. All he knew was that he had to get across the country before she died. What he didn't know then, of course, was that 3 others would die, 2 by his hand. So the guy who the narrator is talking about, he's an ex-cop who's actually beginning early dementia at 50 because he'd done a lot of boxing. And here's another passage. So now he's remembering, and he had left his great aunt in a nursing home in New Jersey, but to take a security job in LA. And so he's thinking about this on the plane. So all packed up and ready to go LA, he had reduced everything he owned to his one large suitcase. He told Lena about the job that Thursday. She had hardly spoken the last 6 months, and she didn't say anything when he told her. She just nodded and seemed to smile, and then turned the palm of her right hand upward on her wheelchair arm. That was how she communicated of late. Small gestures, mostly of resignation and acceptance. But he wasn't sure she had understood what he'd said, and if she had, he was certain that she would soon forget it. He parted from her that day as he always did, kissing her on the top of her head and saying, "I love you, Aunt Lena," and then walking off, unable to look back, not wanting to see her alone in her chair, forsaken. He flew to LA the next day, Friday, and was supposed to start work on Monday. He got that cheap motel room on the edge of North Hollywood, and on Sunday morning, the nursing home called. And as soon as they told him she was dying, he realized she had retained what he had said, and it had broken her will, had killed her. 48 hours after he'd left, she was dying. So maybe that's all I'll read. I don't know how it comes across over the internet, but.
Well, thank you. It comes across great. And in the bit you read is a hook that comes back to shock the reader. And I loved that. I thought even in the sweet part, you're baiting the hook for later on. And big success. Okay. Lauren, your turn.
Sure. So I am just going to start with the second section and read a little bit of this, not the whole thing. Top 40 songs float out of the kitchen where Vi's mom stands over pots of boiling water and sauce for spaghetti. You sneak cigarettes on the porch and pretend to study triangles for tomorrow's quiz before everyone clears out for the holiday. Vi and her mom are taking the train into the city on Sunday to see the big ships coming into New York from all over the world. Whenever you look past the couch and colored TV inside, you catch the back of her mom in faded jeans and gauzy pink shirt dress melting into the music, her long brown hair sweetly ruffled. She turns and drags from an ultra-long cigarette like in a magazine ad. You scrunch your knees in, tugging the sweatshirt Vi lent you over them to keep warm. The air is dark and damp and smells like lavender. Vi, honey, you girls ready? Her mother calls, and Vi blows a final mouthful of smoke toward the street before adjusting the guitar on her back. You ever take that thing off? She shakes her head hard, like she's flinging bugs out of her scalp, then brushes past you in a way that says you're a moron for asking. Makes you want to bolt, but you follow her inside. The house smells a little bit greasy, a little bit cinnamon powder donut. You have never been so aware of scents. Candles of different shapes and sizes flicker in front of a picture window. You sit beneath them on a cushioned bench, staring into the half-lit kitchen. Normal tiles and white cabinets, shelves bulging with appliances, plates, and bowls. The refrigerator is plastered with political stickers, flyers for rallies, Women's Lib and Save the Planet, and Jimmy Carter for president. Hours at the local health food store and public library. Vi's mom's schedule in the ER where she's a nurse, more bumper stickers. One ballooning with red letters says, "Love carefully." Focusing in, you see it's for Planned Parenthood. And I'll stop there.
I love that. I mean, I'm an old guy, and that era to me is like yesterday, and it's so well captured. I'm just sort of bathing in nostalgia right now. But that's the world I remember so well. So this, and obviously for you, an invention because you're not that old. But this is how mine starts. And before we came on air, I was saying to Jonathan, the way that I write a short story is I just write whatever is on my mind that minute. That's how I started. So looking back at this, clearly I'd been having a day of conversations with Hollywood, because this is how it starts. It's called Dying for a Cigarette. The producer's notes came in. The screenwriter saw the email on his phone. The subject line said, "Notes." The phone was set to preview the first several words of the message, which were, "Thanks again for making time for lunch today." The screenwriter looked away. He didn't open the email, didn't read more. Instead, he backed up and sat down on the sofa, stiff and upright, straight like a poker, palms cupped on the cushions either side of his knees. His wife sat down in his lap. She was an hour back from the beauty parlor, still in her afternoon attire, which was a cream silk blouse tucked into a navy linen skirt, which when standing fell just above the knee, and when sitting, especially in a lap, crept a little higher. She was wearing nothing underneath either item. She wondered if he could tell. Probably not, she thought, not yet. He was preoccupied. She lit a cigarette and placed it between his lips. He said, "Thank you." She said, "Tell me about lunch." It was him and 3 of his execs. I think at least one of them was financial. How did it go? Exactly like I was afraid it would. Exactly? More or less, he said, possibly even worse. She said, "Did you make the speech?" "What speech?" "About dying." "It's only a line in the first paragraph, not really a speech." "Did you say it?" He nodded tightly, still a little defiant. I told him for years I had been a good little hack and I had always done what he wanted as fast as he needed it, sometimes overnight, even sometimes on the fly while the camera was rolling. I told him I had never let him down and I had made him millions of dollars. So I told him overall I figured I had earned the right to be left alone on this one, because finally I had the one great idea a guy might ever get in his life. I told him I would rather die than see it compromised. That's the speech I was talking about. It's only a word with a lot of preamble. It's a strong first paragraph, I agree. How did he take it? I don't really know. I went out for a cigarette. So that's the beginning of mine. And again, the green button down there. Get the book. It's full of good stuff. So here's one that is, here's a question coming in. Would you consider co-authoring a novel or a short story? Have you ever done that?
Well, I've never done that. And I think, prose writing is so personal and individual. I guess sometimes maybe people, I don't know if I've heard of people writing books together. Screenplays, they bounce back and forth like that. And I've worked in TV, which is very collaborative. But I think prose writing, I mean, that's part of the reason I think we write books, is to not have anyone interfere except maybe an editor later down the road.
Lauren, what do you think?
Same thing. I mean, I think about, the books that I really love, and it's so much about the voice, because it's one of the things that, just in literature, I mean, that's what you get. You do get a story, and a story is really important, but to be able to really get a sense of like how people speak and how somebody thinks, and it's yeah, I don't know how that would work with a co-author, but yeah.
Actually, I see my friend just commented. I did a graphic novel years ago, and he wrote graphic novels are often collaborative. So that was an interesting collaboration. I wrote the script, and then he somehow took my words. This is Dean Haspiel, a wonderful illustrator, and has many books himself. Look him up, Dean Haspiel. And then he would take it and bring it to life, kind of like a cinematographer, but then also adding to the story. But that was different than sharing prose or going back and forth over a paragraph or something like that. So, sorry to interrupt you.
I think I've done about 3 short stories with other people where the selling point of the anthology was that it would be written in pairs with, generally speaking, the idea was not necessarily to bring together two authors, but to bring together two characters. So that, you know, the appeal of the anthologies would be that you can see your favorite characters working together in unusual pairings. And I did one with Joseph Finder, and one with Kathy Reichs, and one with Karen Slaughter, where it was Reacher working with Nick Heller in Finder's case, and Temperance Brennan in Kathy Reich's case, and Will Trent in Karen Slaughter's case. And, you know, I totally understood the appeal of the proposition, and the anthologies did pretty well and worked out. But we didn't really collaborate at all. You know, all I said was, I'll write a bit, then you write a bit, then I'll write a bit, then you'll write a bit, which was easy to do because, you know, it was just swapping the point of view between the two characters. And of course, I made them write most of it, and I just filled in the blanks, and it worked pretty well. But yeah, it wasn't really collaboration in the sense of sitting there opposite sides of a desk, hashing it out and kind of arguing over words. It was a kind of just putting it together like a jigsaw, really. But I enjoyed it. It worked fine. But generally speaking, I don't even like collaborating with myself, let alone anybody else. Here's a serious question come in saying, for both of you, I guess we've touched on a little bit about the mood of lockdown, but has the state of current affairs and politics had an impact on your writing? If yes, in what way? Lauren, what do you think?
I mean, yes, in the sense that I find it incredibly hard to focus enough to write fiction. Like, it's very hard. The intensity of the world right now is really hard to escape into a fictive world. And Jonathan, I so love what you're saying about that being the solace and the thing that is about giving the life. I mean, I haven't found that yet, and so I'm still kind of, you know, hopeful that it will come, because yeah, the world is terrible. And you know, I feel compelled to kind of, you know, keep on top of that for some reason that I really don't understand.
Jonathan, what about you?
Yeah, well, one thing I think that got me kick-started writing again, just talking about writing, was the old principle of just do 2 pages a day. Don't try to take on the whole world or a whole novel, and sort of get back into that practice of just 2 pages a day, and I'll advance things. And that's what I've done these 6 or 7 months. In terms of the politics, it is entering into the book I'm writing now, but I want to do it in a way where it's well, it fits the tone of the narrator. And there were things I cut from the first book in which I had this sentence about the coming plagues. I mean, we've all known what's going on. And 2 years ago, there was incredible heat here in California, and I went on my phone, I had a blackout, and there was something the phone was still working, about the electric company that we were experiencing a heat storm. And I thought of the OED, because that might have been the first time, you know, the OED tracks the first time something appeared in language. I thought maybe it'd come from the California electrical company, a heat storm. Anyway, I'm trying to work this into my book, and yet still also tell this like noir thriller amidst it all. And I think it's a way for me to try to deal with it. I don't know. It's all, look, we're all, everyone, it's, it's stick together, look after each other, you know. I think it's going to be rocky going forward, but there's so much to be learned from this. I don't know, it's a very Buddhist thing, but we can learn from everything. And to risk being political, I'll just say it, Trump in a weird way is a great teacher. Do the opposite of anything he would do in terms of how you react to another human being, and you're answering the question, what would Jesus do? So you just, anyway, It's trying to make, it's like the Seinfeld principle. When George is like going to be the anti-George, then he does well. So it's a spiritual thing. And sorry if I brought politics up.
That's fine, but I mean, I think it's so grotesque and so ugly that really the only way to deal with it is with allegory, maybe, and science fiction. My wife and I have been reading more science fiction recently than we've ever done. And as a matter of fact, she's like all writers everywhere in the world, I cannot remember the author or the title. So what I'm going to do, if anybody's interested in the book I'm going to describe, I'll tell Mysterious Galaxy what it is. I'll find out. I'll let them know. So ask Mysterious Galaxy for this book. It's a science fiction book, and it's set in the year 2060 at Oxford University in Britain. And the idea is by that point in 2060, they have invented time travel. And so they send this student, this experimenter, back in time. And they're aiming for, I believe, about 1310. But something goes wrong in the circuitry and the thing lands in 1349, which of course is the beginning of the Black Death in Europe, where between a third and a half of the population died of plague. And they can't get it back. And so meanwhile, in 2060 in Oxford, they're talking about the situation. And they know that there's this terrible pandemic happening in 1349. And then the conversation becomes about other pandemics. And bear in mind, this book was written in 1993. So here we are in 2060, and one character says to the other, "Did you survive the pandemic 40 years ago?" Which we found like super spooky. I mean, what a prediction that was. Yeah. 27 years in advance, somebody predicted a big pandemic in 2020. So I'll find out the author and the title. I'll let Mysterious Galaxy know. So if you want to read that book and it's really good, then just ask them. And of course, they will send you one along with the Cocaine Chronicles, which of course you will definitely be ordering anyway, because ignore this part, because it's everybody else in the book that is worth it, and it really is exceptionally good. So anything else? What else have we got here coming in? Anything good? So here's Go ahead.
And they gave the title of the book in the comment section. It says All Clear and Blackout by Connie Willis.
There you go. Excellent. Very good. Thank you so much. This is what is so great about a quality independent bookstore. All you have to do is start vaguely rambling on about a book, and I distinctly remember this so well. Years before I was a writer, years before there was the internet, really, there was no community for instant answers or recommendations or anything like that. I only had one friend who shared a literary taste with me. We worked together, and he and I liked the same kind of books. And I was heading out for lunch one day, and he said, "I just heard something about a book that's supposed to be really, really good. I can't remember the author, and it had something to do with lambs in the title." So I go into the bookstore and I say, "Somebody told me about a book, I can't remember the author, and it has something to do with lambs in the title." And before I had finished my sentence, the guy was giving me The Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris. And, that is what you get from an independent bookstore where, as opposed to, let's not be nasty about chain bookstores because they're lovely, but they don't necessarily have the same level of knowledge. When I was starting out as an author, what you do is you do stock signing. You go to a bookstore and, the big borders as it was then, and you would go to the customer information and they would get your books and you'd sign them all and they'd sell them as signed books. So I was second in line waiting to talk to the person, and the guy before me wanted a copy of Like Water for Chocolate. And the clerk was looking at the computer screen and shaking his head and saying, "We don't have that, never heard of that." And he said, "Come on, it's a big bestseller, you must have it, Like Water for Chocolate." And he said, "No, definitely not." And he spun the screen around to confirm to the guy. And he was looking under the W's because he thought the like was just, you know, California speak at the time. I want Like Water for Chocolate. And and another one, I went in DC. I went into Barnes & Noble in DC very early on. And I did the same thing. I go to the customer service counter and I say, "Hi, I'm an author, Lee Child. I'm here to sign my stock." And she looked it up on the computer and said, "Oh, we ordered 6 and we've sold all 6. I'm sorry." So, and I said, "Oh, that's great, you know, because that's what you want. You want velocity through the store." So I said, "That's fine, no problem. Thank you very much." And she said, "I could order one for you if you like," which I thought was not totally on the ball. So what else can we do? Oh, here's a good question. Any way to get a copy of the Nicotine Chronicles signed by all 3 authors? I'm sure there is. Absolutely there is. I think that Mysterious Galaxy could somehow handle that, I'm sure. Or I suppose an independent bookstore near you could do it. Book signing is a thing that is you know, in the COVID situation, difficult to do because, you know, we couldn't all 3 show up together, and I suppose we could if we all wore masks, but I'm enjoying the masks, to be honest. I love to walk around with my mask on, especially when I go to the bank. I feel like, yeah, this is something I should not be doing.
And I'm going to go ahead and tap back on the mysterious. Okay, there, you can see me now. Because I have the unfortunate duty of having to end events when they are at time. So I am the villain of this story tonight. But I want to say thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lee, Lauren, and Jonathan. It was such a pleasure getting to hear you talk as well as read. And I'm just like, you all picked such great parts where I'm like, I really want to know what happens, which I know is the point of a reading, but I'm like, oh, what did you guys do to me? So I want to thank you so much for spending this evening with us. And thank you so much to all of the readers who joined us as well, and for all of your questions and engagement. It was such a pleasure. Don't forget, you can buy that book down below. And in regards to the question about books/book plates being signed, I will reach out and see about getting book plates signed by each author and sent to the store. So stay tuned on that, but we'll make sure to post about it and let you guys know what we can do. But otherwise, I think that is it for tonight, and we will go ahead and say a big thank you to everyone, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everybody.